Jesus appears to Thomas. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." And Thomas said to him, "My Lord, my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name.
I think it's a delight to know that even after all the celebrations of Easter, it doesn't stop there. It carries on, and these experiences of the disciples are just part of that. And we're going to explore a little bit around that story of the man we call Doubting Thomas as we come. So, have you ever noticed that everyday life presents us with images, and those images sometimes trick our eyes? Now, there are some things that we see, and we can see straight away what they are, what they represent. Certain items, everybody know what that is? It's the Nike Swish, isn't it? Everybody knows that. So when you see that on the side of somebody's shoes, you think, wow, they've got way too much money. McDonald's, everybody loves the golden arches, don't they? We've been there recently. When you see it, you think, you know what they stand for, you know what you can get. What about that? Yeah. Rolls Royce? Yeah. Sometimes you don't see them on the front of the Rolls Royces anymore, but when you see one, you think, oh, that's nice, isn't it? Stands for quality, freedom, and all that sort of thing. But sometimes there are things that are presented to us that some people might see straight away, some people may not, some people may see something completely different. So, for instance, what do you see? Do you see an old lady or a young lady? So who sees the old lady? Who sees the young lady? Who can see both when you actually look at it? Yeah? What about, do you see a Native American? Yeah? Or do you see an Eskimo looking into a cave? Yeah? It's quite deceitful, isn't it? What about that? What do you see? Do you see me or you? It can be quite difficult. What about that? Cleverly done. Yeah, teach or learn. What about that one? Can you see the good in that? Or do you see the evil in it? See, some things hidden. So, sometimes we miss the obvious. Sometimes we see something that somebody else doesn't. And we're going to be looking at this story that's told in the Bible. It's just after Easter, so we're still in time. And it's about this guy called Thomas. Now, I think there's a lot more to Thomas than we're told in some of the chapters of the Bible. And to start with, I think history has given Thomas a bit of a raw deal about his name. Now, when you're remembered by history, what do you want to be remembered by? Do you want to be have a good title like Alexander the Great? Yeah, maybe Peter the Good. Why'd you laugh? Why'd you laugh? That's not fair. But poor old Thomas, Yeah, he might have been. He might have been hoping that you might get something like. Oh, too far, too far. Maybe Thomas the Good. Maybe Thomas the Faithful. Maybe Thomas the Strong, or Thomas the Bold. Pretty much everything. But what does he get remembered for? Doubting Thomas. Now, it helps us, I think, in the grand scheme of things. He got stuck with doubting Thomas, but there is more to Thomas than we see. First fact, Thomas was willing to risk his life. He was willing to risk his life. In fact, he was actually quite brave. He was willing to die for Jesus. He was quite bold. He was willing to take risks. He was willing to ask the hard questions that everybody, when you're in that meeting and you don't understand something, you want to ask the question, but you don't want to seem like a fool. You don't want to seem like you don't understand. Thomas was one of those people that was willing to ask that question so you can sit there and go, oh, that's what it means. He was there. And above all, when faced with the truth, he was willing to believe it. He was willing to accept the truth, even though he hadn't seen it, as we'll see. So in John 11, there is an account of Jesus and Lazarus. Jesus' friend Lazarus, if you remember, had died. Jesus went to comfort his sisters. And as Jesus was about to leave, Thomas, realizing that God was about to do something amazing, said to the others, let's go and follow him. Let's go and see what's going to happen. Even though what was going to happen could lead to danger. In verse 16, Thomas, he's also called the twin, Didymus means twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too, so that we may die with him. So he understood the risks. Now the question is do we have that same desire to follow Jesus? Thomas followed Jesus when it mattered. He followed Jesus at a time when some of the Jews were already looking to work out a way of capturing Jesus and looking at ways to do away with him, because in their eyes Jesus was embarrassing them and that didn't sit very well with them. So Thomas was above all brave. So maybe instead of doubting Thomas, we could have had Thomas the Brave. But we would have got a different story. Sometimes there are questions that we'd like to ask, aren't there, in life, certainly about the Christian faith, but we never want to be the one to ask it because we don't want to seem as if we don't know. Now, it's not wrong not to know. It's not wrong. If you imagine those pictures, it's not wrong that you saw one thing and didn't see the other. You were right, but maybe you didn't see the full picture. Sometimes there are questions that we want to ask, but we don't want to ask it because we don't want to appear as if we're silly or stupid. Thomas was willing to ask those questions, and indeed he did. John 14 says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, would I not have told you? I am going to prepare a place for you. If I go away and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you may be also. You know the way to where I'm going. Lord, Thomas said, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will also know my Father. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. So how many of the disciples were thinking, well, he's going away and we don't know where he's going, so how can we follow if we don't know? Thomas was willing to ask that difficult question. And Jesus is always willing to give the simple and straight answer. In John 14, we see Jesus telling his disciples that he's about to go away, and Thomas is willing to ask the question that they all wanted to ask. They didn't understand, and out of them all, Thomas is the one that asks the question. And then they all know. Thomas didn't get rebuked. Jesus didn't ridicule him. He just stood there and said, Thomas, this is your answer. You do know the way, because I am the way, the truth, and life. He gets his answer. So, why did Thomas get his title? Well, first of all, Thomas knew that Jesus was his Lord and his Saviour. But when it came down to it, Thomas was willing to believe. Not at first, when confronted with the disciples. Thomas got his title because that first meeting, behind closed doors, he wasn't there. He wasn't there. The rest of the disciples and those that were gathered were there. They saw Jesus. They saw the evidence for their eyes. And then when eventually Thomas arrives back at the locked room and they let him in, he's told what had happened. And what was his first thing? Well, firstly, he was grieving for his lost master. He'd seen him die on the cross, and all human emotion tells you that's it. That's finished. Despite what he may have been told, he's in the turmoil of the stress. He's in the turmoil of the grief. What would you do if you were stood there and you were told something amazing has happened, but you had no reference point for yourself? Would you doubt? I would. I would ask those questions. He wanted the proof of seeing the holes in the hands, the holes in the feet, and the hole in the side. And then he said he would believe. And later, when Jesus appeared again, and he was with them, what does Jesus do? He goes to Thomas and says, here, put your finger in the holes. Put your hand in my side and believe. Jesus spoke very special words. Just a few words later, he said, you believe me now because you have seen me, but blessed are those who don't see me and yet still believe. We are those blessed people because we have seen Jesus through the eyes of many other people and we have believed. It's not a sin to doubt. So it's probably better that Thomas got this name, Doubting Thomas, because we know that there's somebody else that may be standing in the same place that we are. We may not know everything. We may doubt the evidence of the words on the page, and we want something more. But we have Thomas's illustration of what it means. And we have Jesus' word that says, blessed are those who believe, even though they haven't seen me. We are those people. We haven't seen Jesus in the same way that the disciples saw him. It's not a sin to doubt. It's how you deal with the doubt that is important. We can doubt. Doubt is generally considered a normal human experience, a temptation rather than a sinful action. We're tempted to doubt, aren't we? To disbelieve things. But doubt can be a catalyst for a deeper understanding. Because when we doubt, we question. When we question, we learn. Stubborn unbelief is discouraged, but honest questions to resolve those doubts are encouraged. It's an opportunity to grow in our faith. A couple of key perspectives on doubt. Doubt versus unbelief. So, doubt is often viewed as a passing feeling, a struggle with uncertainty, whereas unbelief is a deliberate rejection. or a refusal to trust. So it's okay to doubt, but we don't want it to end up in unbelief. Doubt is a component of faith. Many thinkers believe that true faith can coexist with doubt. In fact, questioning can lead to a more profound faith, an examined life, if you like. So it's not wrong to doubt. There are biblical examples. There are figures in the Bible, such as Thomas, who are there. John the Baptist also, he questioned as well. And Jesus addressed them with love and with compassion and with understanding. On Jesus' part, there was no condemnation of the questions that his disciples asked. When you look at, I think, 99% of the parables, 99% of the parables were in language that they would have understood, but the picture may have been missing for them. And what do the disciples do? They go to him privately and they say, Lord, we don't understand this. Please tell us. The parable of the sower is one of those. Please tell us what it means. And then what does Jesus do? He tells them. He doesn't hide the truth and say, go away and work it out for yourself. He reveals the truth to them. In the same way as he revealed himself to Thomas and said, here you are. Here are the holes in my hand, the holes in my feet, the hole in my side. Now believe. We are the blessed ones as well, because we have also believed.